my friends. Welcome to the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with yours truly, Dr. India White. I'm thrilled to be here with you this day. I hope that you are winning in life. I hope that you're getting all of your wishes answered and that you're making great connections and that you're fulfilling your purpose and that you're remaining gritty. Now, let's get into our show. First things first, the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White will be featured on X Factor EDU network hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and it can be found also on social media platforms and on Spotify. Speaking on social media, you can check out my Facebook at Miss India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter's Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram's Indie238. YouTube's India White 123, and TikTok is Dr. India White. I want to also encourage you to check out the website www.india-white.com for books, blogs, and to schedule me for a speaking or coaching event. I usually try to keep things very updated on the website. I just released my newsletter for the month so that if you're looking to see which events you can catch me at, maybe you want to just come say hi, or maybe you just had a question, or maybe you would like to snag me along something, then you can check out the newsletter and you can check out the website. Thank you to those in advance. Speaking of events, we're super excited. We've got NCSM coming up, NCTM's coming up, NATM, ICTM, OCTM, ATM and E and beyond. Northwest Conference, South Carolina's math conference is coming up as well. Thank you to every single conference rockstar that has been involved. Thank you to Sabbath for being absolutely amazing. And just, I can't wait to see all of you guys and to mingle and to talk about grit and so many other things. All right. Now, also, the Grit Mini Workshop will be featured on the Grassroots Workshop website, Grassroots Workshops website. Please visit that website. Lots of great things going on there. And if you're just joining this podcast in particular, is that if you are trying to close the achievement gap, but you're having classroom management issues, or if your students aren't motivated to do the work, then join me here. We're going to talk about key topics to help us get through. And so with that said, so much is going on with the school year. Many of you rockstar teachers, principals, you have been implementing grit. You've been implementing so many other ideas that are wonderful. And some of you might be at the brink of burnout. And we just got to keep it real. So I'm going to be talking with you about how you can overcome burnout through grit. Again, how you can overcome burnout through grit. Again, grit being defined by Dr. Duckworth being the passion and the perseverance that you need to obtain a long-term goal. But what if you're going and then you overexert yourself to where now you're like, I have all this passion, but I don't have the energy now. What do I do now? How do I push through when I'm burned out? This is a very real place to be. As many people find themselves in this place, whether it's, through, working out, if it's through running a business, whatever, like people find themselves in this place often. I believe it's about 50 or so % of people experience burnout at least on the workforce. So, I mean, it's a real thing. So my question to you then is, what do you do when grit runs out? What do you do when you don't have any more passion or perseverance, or you don't feel like you do? Or maybe you've encountered something and it's just stuck in you, like in your spirit. You can't seem to overcome it. What do you do? How do you bounce back? What do you do? So I want to give you some tips from me first, just as to some key pointers and some takeaways that I think could benefit you as you're trying to overcome burnout through grit. So first things first, so from my heart, some tips for overcoming burnout. One is to balance. Take a look at your schedule, take a look at what you've got going on and say, how balanced am I? Do I have so much work over my head? I'm swimming in it and I'm not really paced myself appropriately. So now I have all of these assignments, all of these things due. So if that's you, don't beat yourself up, but just realize that you might have to start utilizing, other hours of the day, extra hours of the day, that maybe you wanted to sleep at 9:30, but maybe you got to start sleeping at 11:30 until you get some of these assignments done. Or maybe if you're working too much, maybe you can pull back some. Maybe you can, figure out how can you reserve some of your energy. Like, I understand you're a rock star. I understand you're gritty, but we still need you around, right? So it's a fine balance as to, and you've got to listen to your body. Your body will tell you, like, okay, pump brakes, that's too much. Or, listen to your support group. It's just the next thing. Get a support group if you don't have one. Get someone that you can talk to. I thank goodness, I thank God for my mentor, Mama Sharon, who is there for me, who, I can email her something or talk with her, or, maybe a teacher or a friend. It's wonderful to have people in your support group. One of my besties in Pennsylvania is wonderful. She's a wonderful person I go to just to kind of bounce off, just, hey, am I okay here? It's okay, guys. Have those people that support you in your corner so that they can keep you abreast as to what reality really is looking like. Because sometimes when you're falling apart, you don't really see it. They might see it though. So it's good to have another person in to see, your weak spots, or to see where you're being blindsided. So definitely get a support group out there to help you to navigate through life so that you're not setting yourself up to fall and to fall hard. It's always tragic to hear stories about people that burn out, and some people, unfortunately, it affects their health. We've got to, this thing goes down to our health all over again. We've got to be more conscious about our health and our well-being, even mentally, emotionally, psychologically. Like, how are we taking care of ourselves, right? So get a support group, then reset. Give yourself permission to reset. So you might have had many deadlines, many things, and sometimes it's so overwhelming you don't know how to process it. You don't even know how to start that one task because it just seems daunting and overwhelming. Give yourself permission to walk away from it, take a breather, think about it, pull it back together, and reset. And then delegate if you have to delegate. So if you're like, I've got a million things, I just can't do it. Be vulnerable enough to delegate. Delegation does take vulnerability because you know that yourself, you can do it. You can be a rock star, right? And it's perfect. It's the way you want it. And some of you out here, you are amazing. And some of you are perfectionists, right? So it's hard for you to delegate because you're like, well, they're not going to do it exactly the way I want it. Or they're going to they're going to miss detail and all that. But sometimes you have to delegate. So, you might have to look up some internships or some interns or some opportunities to work with people that are willing to take some loads off of you to help you with the different tasks and, assignments that you're part of those goals again. So it's okay to reset. When you're resetting, make sure that you're saying, okay, I had plans 1 through 3. This is where I left off on plan 1. Let me start back at the beginning to make sure I can follow through on those plans and execute. Now, when you're doing this, it's important to note to yourself to really count the cost to see if you can execute on those plans that you have established before you. And if you can't, that's when it's important for you to look into delegation. Resetting, see it as a fresh start. See it as a time to get excited again, to get those juices rolling and flowing again, because you want to just cheer yourself on as you are resetting and re-attacking or revamping yourself and reconquering those things that you're set out to do. Okay. And then afterwards, you want to delegate. So when you're delegating tasks, find people that are just experts in what it is that you need done. If it's social media, if it's writing, if it's whatever, go out there and search for people that are hungry for work, that are hungry to help you, whether they're in your support group or not in your support group. There are so many interns and people that, are willing to help and support and come alongside you. So make sure you're taking advantage of the resources that are out there for you. You might be like, okay, well, how do I do that? Find a Facebook group or a social media chat group that has those type of people there that have accomplished it. So for instance, if you're trying to write a book, then find a group of authors and then put in the author chat, hey, I need someone to help me write this book. And then there you go. You'll find so many people that are waiting to help you. So that's just one strategy. I would also say with delegation, if you're, at a particular assignment and you're trying to delegate, make sure it's tasks that the person that they report to, and that, you don't absolutely have to be the one that's doing, the obligated task, but that you can, send it off to somebody else. It could be media, it could be marketing, it could be advertising, it could be sending an email, it could be whatever. Just make sure that you can delegate to someone that has proven, their sense of expertise. And if you're like, well, I don't really know India, I don't really know anybody, well, then find someone that maybe you can train, maybe someone that you can teach along the way, that can, gladly help, step in and support you as you're, expanding and resetting. And then, of course, making sure that you're celebrate yourself, celebrate, your accomplishments, or celebrate your accomplishments. Celebrate the baby steps on your agenda. Make sure that you, really pat yourself on the back in this time as you're trying to overcome burnout. Because I think the reason why we burn out sometimes is because we're always looking at the bigger picture, and we're never giving ourselves like as much validation or credit as we should, because we're really hard on ourselves until the task is done. And then even when the task is done, we're still finding fault, right? We're still critical. And so when you learn to celebrate, that helps balance that load to where you're not so critical, but you can still see the good. You can still be optimistic as you're moving forward. Okay. And then next, plan again. So if you're like, well, I'm burned out, I did so much, now I don't know what to do, plan again. Maybe you have to, I don't know, reset, start from scratch, replan, plan again, and see what you can, salvage, see what, maybe wasn't working for you, things like that. Plan again, and continue to look long term at the process that you've been in, and the progress that you've been making along the way. Now, relationship between grit, burnout, and well-being in emergency medicine residents. And we're just going to talk about burnout in general. So it says grit, which is defined as perseverance and passion for long-term goals, attempts to quantify the ability to maintain sustained effort through an extended length of time. Our objective in this study, right, is to assess burnout and well-being and examine their relationship with the character trait grit in emergency medicine residents, which makes sense. These people are, whether they're going to school or just, doing whatever they're doing, and to see how can they balance what they're doing without burnout. So let's keep looking. So they did a total of 222 residents that completed the survey. Okay. So they had residents with high grit scores. They had lower odds of experiencing burnout and well-being. Residents that had lower grit scores were more likely to experience burnout and have a low well-being. So their conclusion in the study was that there was a significant relationship that exists between grit, burnout, and well-being. Again, they found that there is a significant relationship between grit, burnout, and well-being. They also found that residents that had high grit, they appeared to be less likely to experience burnout and low well-being, while those with low grit are more likely to experience burnout and low well-being. So burnout is defined as a prolonged response to chronic emotional and interpersonal stressors on the job, defined by 3 dimensions. There's emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a sense of reduced personal accomplishment. Wow. Again, emotional exhaustion, depersonalization, and a sense of reduced personal accomplishments. It affects physicians at every level of training, from med school to practicing clinicians. And then it says at the start of the residency, well-being measures in residents are consistent with the findings in medical school. However, after entering training, residents' depression and burnout rates increase significantly compared to their peers. So they have some literature that they're talking about that talks about burnout and stressors of factors, negative factors that are related to this, which included depression, burnout, and bullying in an effort to determine overall well-being. Very interesting. So residents with high burnout scores were more likely to report making errors and providing subsatisfactory level of patient care. So grit, it says it's been found to be a superior predictor of success in several high stress, high achievement fields. So, we've got the United States Military Academy, which found that. It says, in fact, grit was a superior predictor than measures of standard intelligence, and gritty adult learners reach higher educational achievements, and gritty teachers are more likely to retain their jobs and instill a higher academic achievement in students. Grit and resilience have also been offered as possible explanations for success in health professional students who succeed in the face of pressure. Okay, so they're going on here. They're saying there's higher grit scores for medical education correlated with higher performance in historically difficult courses like gross anatomy, and residents with below median grit were more than twice as likely to consider leaving surgical residency training. Furthermore, grit has shown to be related to residents' wellness and burnout in surgical training, and it is predictive of later psychological well-being. Yeah, measured by the Maslow burnout inventory. Wow, and the psychological general well-being scale. So those are their instruments that they're using, I guess, here. So again, the Maslow burnout inventory and the psychological general well-being scale, they found that grit was predictive of later psychological well-being. Okay, so they're going to keep going, and in their results, they're sharing with us these results. And it says the grit score was significantly higher for these residents here. We'll keep going. Then they also said in the study, they looked at the prevalence rates of burnout and well-being by the PGY level, sex, and grit. And they said that the PGY level was associated with higher scores for emotional exhaustion. However, rates of depersonalization, low personal accomplishment, and low well-being were not. So very interesting. So all you med people out there, I know you're probably digging this. So it says here, they found the median grit score in EM residents were higher than the median grit score in the general population. Resident grit was estimated to be slightly lower than that reported in surgical residents, but higher than that of attending physicians across multiple specialties. Notably, grit appears to predict burnout and psychological well-being in EM residents. They also found that residents who screened positive for low well-being had significantly lower mean grit scores. So their findings suggest that grit may be able to identify residents who are at the greatest risk of burnout, low psychological well-being, and depression, looking at their grit scores. So that's something that we can take in as we're considering this in education. And then it says, for their conclusion, burnout and low well-being are prevalent in emergency medicine students. We have identified a significant relationship between the character trait grit with resident burnout and well-being. Okay, and emergency medicine residents with high grit appear less likely to experience burnout and well-being. Inversely, residents with low grit appear more likely to experience burnout and well-being. So very interesting study that they were able to even see this in the lens of medical students and for doctors and things. So I do have a grit workbook for doctors if you guys are interested in that. I know I do mostly education, but I do have a little thing like that for you guys in the medical field. So that's something to think about, the correlation between grit and burnout. So the higher the grit, chances of burnout are slim or less. So that's something that we want to take now and think about as to how we can help our students. I did find another one that I wanted to share with you guys, another article that I thought was pretty interesting. This actually was on LinkedIn. Go LinkedIn. This article I found on LinkedIn, it's called The Impact of Burnout on Grit, How Reduced Resilience Affects Perseverance and Passion. Wow. Reduced resilience affects your perseverance and your passion. Mike Pascoe. Okay, so he's a burnout expert. Let's see what he had to say. So he wrote this on July 12th. He says, burnout, resilience, and grit are interconnected concepts that significantly influence an individual's ability to achieve long-term goals in a world where the demands of work, personal life, and societal pressures are constantly increasing. Understanding how these elements interplay is crucial. So burnout can erode resilience, leading to diminished grit, the very trait that fuels perseverance and passion for achieving significant goals. So he's going to talk about it. So we've got to understand how to avoid burnout for not only ourselves, also for our students. Okay, understanding burnout, resilience, and grit matters. So he says there's a couple of reasons, and we have to understand how burnout impacts resilience and grit. So he says it's essential for a couple of reasons here. First things first, he talks about the personal well-being, then the professional success, because if you're burned out, that leads to decreased productivity, higher turnover rates, and a lack of innovation. And then, of course, it also affects your ability to have that long-term achievement. It's imperative because grit, like he says here, is critical for overcoming your obstacles and staying motivated. So let's keep going. Understanding burnout, resilience, and grit. Burnout is a chronic physical and emotional exhaustion caused by prolonged stress or overwork. According to 2019, 76% of employees experience burnout on the job at least sometimes. Moreover, burnout affects various aspects of life beyond work, including family dynamics and social interactions. Resilience is the capacity to recover quick from difficulties and setbacks. It's a critical trait that helps individuals maintain their emotional equilibrium and continue to strive toward their goals despite obstacles. A resilient person can adapt to changes and recover from disappointments with a renewed sense of purpose and determination, that growth mindset, right? Grit is a concept popularized by the psychologist Dr. Angela Duckworth in her seminal work. She defines grit as a combination of passion and perseverance for long-term goals. Grit is not just about working hard, right? It's about maintaining effort and interest over the years despite failures, adversities, and plateaus in progress. Her study suggests that grit is a more accurate predictor of success than talent or intelligence. So let's keep going. The 4 facets of grit and impact of burnout. Interest, huge, right? So if you lose interest, then that can lead to a loss of enthusiasm and engagement, which makes it difficult for someone to maintain the same level of interest. Very interesting. We have to be able to sustain the interest of students and of teachers. You know, if you're a principal leading teachers, we have to. Okay, the next thing here, practice. Deliberate effort is sapped by burnout, which drains the energy and mental focus required for rigorous practice. Chronic stress associated with burnout can lead to cognitive failure, reducing the ability to concentrate and persist in skill development. So athletes may find their training sessions less productive when they are mentally and physically exhausted. Next thing, purpose. A sense of meaningful direction that aligns personal goals with a broader mission or vision can erode when burnout leads to cynicism and feeling disconnection from one's work or activities. Again, a sense of meaningful direction that aligns personal goals with a broader mission or vision can erode when burnout leads to cynicism and a feeling of disconnection from one's work or activity. This disconnection makes it difficult to see the value or importance of one's efforts. Okay, so it says, for example, healthcare workers, they might feel their senses faded under a strain of constant high pressure environments. Another area that's, is hope, having hope. Resilience and optimism when facing setbacks are undermined by burnout, which fosters a sense of helplessness and pessimism. So if you're dealing with burnout, it could foster helplessness and pessimism. So the reduced resilience from burnout makes it harder for someone to remain hopeful and optimistic when they're encountering obstacles. This is why we need mentors, and this is why we need a support group. All right, so that was great. So with that said, that was really neat for us to talk about, just the psychological effect of burnout, how it's intertwined with being able to remain resilient, being able to have grit. And the more grit you have, the chances of you burning out are less. But the lower your grit level, then the chances of burning out does increase. So, like I said, I think that you should definitely consider my tips for burnout and having balance and having a support group and being able to reset, delegate, and celebrate. And then, of course, plan again. Whatever you do, don't unplug on yourself or on your mission, and don't give up. Just don't. Just throw out that wild card of I can fail, I can give up. If you throw that out, then you'll always be successful because you'll always have a way to reset. You always have a way to start over. And then that's my hope for all of us, is that, as we're cultivating grit in ourselves, and we're also doing the same for our kids, that we will be able to taste of success in whatever capacity that we serve in education. So thanks so much for joining me today on the Grit and Equity Talks podcast with Dr. India White. Again, this podcast will be featured on the X Factor EDU network, hosted by Dr. Matthew Joseph, and you can find it on Spotify. Check out the website, www.india-white.com, for books, blogs, and to schedule me for an event. You can check out my handles here. Facebook's Miss India White. LinkedIn is the India White. Twitter's Indie Speak and Teach. Instagram's India238. YouTube's India White 123. And TikTok is Dr. India White. I will see many of you guys at these upcoming conferences. Can't wait to see you guys at NCSM and NCTM. And thank you to those that will be visiting the several sessions that we'll have at both of those conferences, and and just mingling and sharing your great news and your great events with us. Check out the Grassroots Workshop website for the Grit Mini Workshop. And then remember, if you're trying to close achievement gaps or having classroom management issues, or if your students aren't motivated to do the work, tune into this podcast on Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the support that you need. So with that said, guys, you guys have been fabulous. Thank you so much for another wonderful session of the Grit and Equity Talks podcast. And until next time, stay gritty. See ya.